Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this NVivo and Sage Publishing webinar um, series. Today we have Erin Singer from JSI Research, and she will be talking about survey methods as an opportunity for analytic integration in mixed methods evaluation. Um, Right. Just to say that I'm introduce myself, I'm Silvana Di Gregorio. I'm the academic director of QSR International. I'm a sociologist. I'm a qualitative researcher myself. Um, my colleague Stacy Penna, who normally hosts these webinars, um, is unable to be here today. I mean, she might join us later. Um, but she is the NVivo community director. And Alicia Owen is the commissioning editor for research methods at Sage Publications. And unfortunately, she can't be with us today as well. So you have me as your host. And uh, so I'll be handling the questions. So just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and um, at the you'll all receive a copy of the recording afterwards, so you can review it if you want to. We also have, if you notice in the handouts area, we have the PDF of the slides that Erin will be showing, so you can download those. We'll be taking questions at the end of the session, but you can put them into the questions area yourself. So as Erin goes through her her slides, if you have any questions that arise at the moment, please type them in the question area, and we'll get to them after the presentation for that. We'll also be running two polls towards the beginning of the session, just to find out a bit more about you. So if I just introduce Erin Singer, as you can see, she's a data and evaluation consultant with JSI. Very experienced in research and evaluation. And as you can see, her focus has been substance use, youth development, and child welfare. She's also been an epidemiologist for government, for nonprofits, for academics, etc. I'll just hand over to Erin. So I will just make her the presenter in a moment here. So I'll just hand over. To Erin, and we're just waiting to view Erin's screen.
It is not showing it currently that I can do the
Right.
screen. Maybe the other one.
Okay, so I shall now change that around. Okay. And just see if that will do. So sorry for this technical hitch. Yes, you can see your screen. Hello, Erin. I think you're muted, so you might want to unmute yourself. Yes, Erin, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay.
Yes, I
Yeah,
can,
well, now it looks like I can unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you, Silvana. As you mentioned, I'm Erin Singer. I'm from JSI Research and Training Institute. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about survey methods as an opportunity for analytic integration in mixed methods evaluation. And just to check, you can see the slides show right now, right, Silvana?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, then let's hope they advance here. Okay, great. So survey methods often are thought of as more quantitative research. Some do use them to gather mixed methods data, and they'll have closed-ended questions as well as open-ended questions, but often the closed-ended questions will be followed up with a request for just providing further explanation or illustration in the form of an open-ended question, or surveys may ask related but distinct closed and open-ended questions. And in these instances, it's usually more common that evaluators or researchers will use concurrent triangulation design, where they're analyzing the responses for each qualitative and quantitative data more separately, and then they compare the results in a narrative. However, what I want to talk about today is really about how survey methods can be utilized where you can use both the closed and open-ended questions as an opportunity to move that point of integration from the results section to the analysis phase. Doing this really allows for the discovery of complex relationships, and it often can initiate new ideas. So today I'd like to provide an example. I'm sure that there are several different ways that you could do this analysis in NVivo, and I don't claim to be an expert in all that is NVivo, but I hope that this can at least provide a practical example, and hopefully you can walk away with a pretty good idea and some confidence in how to do this yourself if you are interested. And I think next is the poll questions. So I just had a couple poll questions to get a sense of who is in the webinar so that I know where to kind of focus the talk today to make sure that you guys all get the most out of it that you can.
Okay, so I will just launch the first poll question. Right, so I don't know if you can see that. So we're still collecting responses. Right.
Are both the poll questions up there?
This is the first one, so people are still voting on the first one. And so now if I close it now, nearly everyone's voted, and if I share it, so can you see the results now? Yeah. So basically,
I cannot see them, but
you can't see them. Right. So I shall. Yeah, I think the attendees are seeing them. So basically, 42% have some basic knowledge, but not much experience. A third have some experience. Only 3% are an expert, and 21% say they're completely green.
okay.
For that. So
And that's in.
yeah. So that's so like yeah. So a fifth are completely green, completely new to this. Only a very small percentage are an expert, and yeah, most people have some experience, some basic knowledge about it. So I'll
Okay.
just run the second um, second one. So
yeah, the second one should get, it's a little bit more about the practical skills about actually using mixed methods surveys in NVivo.
Right, so I'll just launch that. So yeah, so he can start voting. So people are still voting. Right, so I'll just share that. So yeah, so this is a bit different. Like 2/3, 67% say they're completely green using for mixed methods analysis. Yeah, 20% have some basic knowledge but not much experience. 12% have some experience. 1% have an expert. So most people are completely green in this case. Okay. Right.
Okay, that's great.
So
Great.
like that. And so we're back to your slides.
Back to my screen. Great. So thank you for taking the time to answer those questions. I think that helps show that we'll spend a little bit more experience doing the demonstration. I'll kind of give a little bit of background about mixed methods, evaluation research, and using surveys. And then I'll spend more time doing the demonstration in NVivo, I think, to make sure that that is helpful for you as well. So I might go a little quicker through some of the beginning slides, but you will have them all available, and please put questions in the chats if anything comes up as I'm going through. You know, as there's a variety of expertise in the room, I just want to ensure that we're all starting from the same place. So I just will briefly review the major mixed methods designs and approaches to integration. So there are sequential designs that have data collection performed in a sequence. So the results of one strand will influence the data collection for the next strand. And there's two types of designs most commonly used here is first the exploratory sequential, where qualitative data is collected prior to the collection of quantitative data. And this is often used as a strategy to design an instrument or a questionnaire or to gather further information to guide the content of an intervention. So the next kind is explanatory sequential, and this is where quantitative data is collected prior to qualitative data. And investigators who use this type of design often do so because there's a need for an explanation of quantitative findings that they might have had in a quantitative designed experiment or study first. And then finally is the concurrent design, and this is where the data collection for the strands happens at the same time. And they're often embedded, one in the other, sometimes with one method being a primary method. And for the concurrent designs, there's less emphasis placed on how one strand informs the next strand, and more on making an inference or drawing conclusions from the concurrent strands. And then with each type of design, there's often a type of integration that is common, although not necessarily always this way. There's some that are more common given each design. So for example, in the exploratory sequential design, they often use a building approach to understand how the data might sort of generalize. So one database will inform the data collection of the other to build into something more quantitative. The explanatory sequential design often uses a connecting approach, and this is to sort of dive deeper or explain a phenomenon. So here, one database is often linked to the other. It's often through sampling. So for example, a common way this is done is there might be a telephone survey with more quantitative data being collected, and then based on the answer to one of those questions, they might do a callback interview with a more open-ended, semi-structured interview where they're collecting qualitative data from a group that answered a question in a particular way. And then in convergent designs, they often use a merging approach. So this is, like I said, bringing the two databases together for analysis and making comparisons in that way. And surveys, this is where surveys really shine. They make this process much easier because you actually already have one database in which both types of data are already merged together for the analysis. And that's where I wanted to focus today. This is just Creswell's quote about integration, where it's really a key component of mixed methods approach, defined as an intentional process by which the researcher brings quantitative and qualitative data together in one study. And furthermore, Fetters and Freshwater, they have a paper from 2015 that was titled the 1 + 1 = 3 Integration Challenge. And I really love this. It was a challenge that was put out to the mixed methodologist community to try to start to realize the benefits of mixed methods, of really producing a whole through this integration that's greater than the sum of the individual qualitative and quantitative parts. So you can really have a more comprehensive and a deeper understanding of a topic or a program that you would be able to understand by just looking at qualitative or quantitative data alone. So they really talk about this hope of moving the conversation forward by de-emphasizing some of those prescribed designs that were really emphasized earlier on in mixed methods research, those explanatory, exploratory, concurrent designs that I just went over, and starting to center the attention on really this explanatory power that you can gain from meaningfully integrating the data, particularly during the analysis. So this presentation is just kind of trying to move that conversation forward, and it provides one example of how to meet this challenge. So, like I said, I have an applied example here, and that's what I'll use to do the demonstration in NVivo. I'll just take a minute to kind of just give you background about that survey. So for those that might not be as familiar with New Hampshire, we conducted the New Hampshire Young Adult Assessment. And why we did this was there was recent data available from NSDA, the National Survey of Drug Use and Health, that found that the risk behavior of New Hampshire's young adults really outpaced national averages in several categories. You can see here, young adults reported monthly binge drinking, marijuana use, illicit drug use, as well as signs of alcohol and other substance use disorders at rates that were significantly higher than national averages and actually even higher than the other northeastern states. Furthermore, New Hampshire's young adults actually experienced major depressive episodes and other mental illnesses and had serious thoughts of suicide that were at higher rates than other age cohorts. So this was concerning to the state, and they contracted with JSI to complete the 2019 Young Adult Assessment, which actually was also completed previously in 2015. And the focus in 2019 was to really try to better understand why are we seeing these high rates of use in New Hampshire. We first identified the prevalence within the survey, but then really dug deeper to understand the young adults' opinions about protective factors and their risk behaviors, their perceptions, how they relate to substance use and misuse in the state, and just sort of overall attitudes and experiences of being a young adult living in New Hampshire. And it was an online survey that was fielded from October to December of 2019. It was a convenient sample. We used several recruitment methods, social media, email listservs, flyers. We did also use a young adult online survey panel to help increase our sample size. We ended up with about 2,700 completed surveys, and we did weight the data so that the results could be generalized to the young adult population in New Hampshire. And there was a series of different closed-ended questions, and then that asked about different things like substance use and different protective and risk factors. And then there were these series of open-ended questions where I'll focus in on. And these were those young adults' overall experiences. It asked questions like, what are you and other young adults living in New Hampshire excited about? What's frustrating to you about living in New Hampshire? What gives you a sense of hope about the future? And what, if anything, is blocking you from reaching your future goals? And to participate, it was young adults between the ages of 18 and 30, and they did have to currently reside in New Hampshire. And they did receive a Visa gift card as an incentive through lottery drawings for participating. And so then here, just quickly in terms of the analysis methods, we sort of had two phases. And here you can see that in phase one, this is an example of integration that happened during the results and the discussion section. So the initial analyses of the quantitative and qualitative data were conducted in parallel. We had a quantitative analytics team that ran all the qualitative data and the statistical analyses in SAS. And then we had a qualitative analytics team that really immersed themselves in those open-ended questions and developed an inductive coding scheme and conducted more of a thematic analysis using NVivo 12. Unfortunately, we did not have the upgraded NVivo yet. We were using NVivo 12, and we did not have access to the automatic coding using pattern coding. And we had, because it's a survey, we had a larger number of responses than you usually have with qualitative data. So we decided to code a selection of the responses until we felt we had really reached saturation. And this ended up being about 30% of the responses, and it was about 470 responses. It ranged, depending on the question that was being asked, between 417 responses and 510. And we are hopeful to upgrade and then run some of that automatic coding to kind of confirm some of the findings I'll talk about here. And then in contrast, we had phase two, where we did our mixed methods analysis and really started to integrate during the analysis phase those quantitative and qualitative findings. And in this way, we were able to conduct a comparative analysis of the coded qualitative data across some of these quantitatively defined subgroups. So we really wanted to kind of dig deeper into the experiences of young adults in New Hampshire and see where there might be differences based on different demographic characteristics or patterns of substance use, age, gender. We could have looked at many different things. What we chose to look at, because of our findings from phase one, was differences in some of their qualitative responses based on how they had self-reported their financial situation. And that was really because in phase one, we came up with sort of these high-level major recurring themes, which included personal finances that came up again and again, whether they were asked about their hopes or their frustrations or their barriers. Often personal finances would come up, as well as these other two, community and social support and political and social policy. So we had asked a question, and it was considering your own income and the income from any other people who help you, how would you describe your overall personal financial situation? And as you can see, over half of the sample were financially secure, and about 11% did not meet their basic expenses, and 28% just met their basic expenses. And when we look at the quantitative data by self-reported financial situation, we found that those who were more financially insecure, so did not meet their basic needs, in this graph it's that orange bar, they were most likely to use substances, as you can see here, and they also were more likely to have higher rates of depression, as well as less social support. So in phase 2, we posed these high-level evaluation questions about differences in sources of excitement and frustration and hopes for the future, as well as barriers for reaching future goals, and seeing whether there were differences in these based on the young adult's self-reported financial situation. And I'm really going to be focusing here. This is kind of the overall evaluation questions. I'm going to provide some higher level, the findings that we got from these last two questions, number 2 and 3. And that's really for you to kind of see from the beginning where we're going, what we were able to do with this type of an analysis. And then I'll kind of back up and do the demonstration in NVivo and really zone in on this number 2, hopes for young adults. And what we found there to just provide the example. But you can see here, this is sort of what we ended up with, just a couple of methodology notes that we decided not to include, or we included only those that had 15% or greater of the young adults that had mentioned this theme for at least one of the financial situation categories. And if we didn't have at least 4, we took the top 4 themes that came up. And we did not report on any sub-themes when the sample was less than 5 within a financial situation. So you can see here, this is the sources of hope for the future, that people were the most commonly mentioned source of hope among young adults. And going across that bar, you can see this was the same, pretty much based on, not based on financial situation. So most were at 30% or above, and actually a little bit higher at 38% of those that don't meet their needs spoke about people as a source of social support. And actually, when they talked about people, they often talked about their children. So one young adult said, "I want to become a nurse, and my kids are a big part of my life choices. I want to have a good job and be successful for them." And I'm really going to hone in on this people, this one finding of people, to show you how we got to this kind of one bar when I go through my demonstration. But you can see here that young adults also mentioned financials, and this was most often mentioned among those that had met their basic needs with a little left over. They were often in relation to graduating from college and being able to get a good job, having hopeful job prospects and satisfaction. And then those that don't meet their needs had a very much higher percentage of a sense of hopelessness, which was concerning for us. And then they also would often mention government, often changes in government and social policies, given the timing of the survey, as well as being right before the election. And then barriers to meeting future goals. You can see here, with the exception of those who live comfortably, over half of young adults in New Hampshire faced financial barriers to meeting their goals. And then compared to those with less financial security, those who live comfortably were more likely to mention a lack of barriers or internal factors. And this was often things like a lack of motivation or self-esteem. One young adult said, "The only thing that can block someone's future is themselves. No one else can stand in the way." And then for another example there, you can see the young adults mentioned health pretty much across the board, regardless of the financial situation. And this was mostly related to healthcare costs and mental health. Okay, so now that I've sort of given that overview, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and hope that this works here. I'm hopeful to switch over to NVivo and do a little bit of a demonstration of how we got there. And let's see. Are you seeing NVivo now?
Yes, we're seeing NVivo.
Great. Okay, it worked. So how we got there. This is NVivo, opened up. I just have it opened up to the project that we used. But, we first went here and imported our project. We used Excel to import it. You can also use SPSS or Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, one of the different programs that you might have actually conducted the survey in. And the thing I want to highlight here that we were able to do, and what makes this so much easier in NVivo, is that when we imported the survey in, it auto codes using the import wizard so that each open-ended question is coded as its own node. And then all of the closed-ended questions, like a lot of those demographics that we would be using, as well as this question about financial situation, were labeled as attributes in the classification sheet. So each one of those attributes was attached to the qualitative information from each question, which was now its own node. Just a thing to note is that you can't change the data after it's been imported. So you want to make sure that you have recoded all your data in another program first. I think there is a possibility of doing some grouping of values in NVivo. I didn't do this. I'm most comfortable working in statistical software package like SPSS. So I did that first, and then made sure I had everything coded in the way I wanted when I brought it in. So, for example, we asked several different race categories, and I collapsed some of those categories before bringing it in to NVivo, so that I had the specific categories. Or age, we asked age, they gave us our general age, and we collapsed them into 18 through 20, 21 through 30, that sort of thing. So once it's imported into NVivo in this way, where there's a node for each question and attributes for each case, that allows us to analyze the respondents in different groups, what they're saying in response to particular questions. And how we did this is there's a few different ways. Like I said, you could do this in NVivo. In this Explore tab up here at the top, I think the most common ways is either through a coding query or a crosstab query. We ended up using a crosstab query, but I will just show you in the coding query is that you could bring up a coding query. You can select the items. So we would select, you can see here, these are the open-ended questions. How I was saying they were each open-ended question was a node. I might choose just excites, so all the answers to the question about excites. And I might look at it coded at a case where the survey respondent might have been a particular age. So the age equals 18 to 21. And then I would run the query. And what comes up in a minute is all of the responses for those that were 18 to 21, what their responses were to the question about what are your hopes for the future. So you could read through this and get a sense of just what that group is saying about their hopes. What we did was to actually run this crosstab. So this allows you to look a little bit at the patterns of what people, of the codes that people are saying, and not as much the detail of what they are saying within each code. And I'll show you what I mean there. Again, I did it in selected items, and I look within this one code of excites. That was the question about what excites you about the future. And then this is my classification. Again, here for this example, we used financial situation. And then I would add in all of the different nodes that I wanted to look at. So I here took each one, and just a little extra note here of what we did that I think is a helpful tip if you are doing this as well is we coded how our coding structure worked is that we had parent nodes, and this here is the parent nodes, and then we had child nodes underneath them. So for example, here's the health one. Our parent node is health, and our child nodes, we had just a general health category, health insurance, mental health, and physical health. And we did not code anything to our parent node. We only coded at these child nodes. And I'll show you why that made a difference here. I say okay, and then you can run the query. And it will come up. You can start to see here that it's having the columns here are the quantitative categories. The rows are the qualitative codes. And inside each cell is this is the sample size or the number of respondents that talked about this particular node or code. You can have this be different. You can have different cell content. So it could also be just coding references instead of cases coded. You can have different values. This is counts. You could also do some percentages. You could shade them. And then because we had that structure of parent and child, having this hierarchical name structure here helps us see what's the parent and what's the child. And I chose to aggregate all of my codes up to the parent node so that what that does is if within, say, this age-related one, we had double-coded passage to generational differences and independence, then when it's aggregated up to the adult or the parent one, this age-related code, it would only count it once. And that helped us to make sure that we were seeing accurate patterns across the parent nodes, but still had information underneath when we were trying to understand a little bit more about what they were actually saying when they were talking about age-related things. Hopefully that makes some sense there. And I see the time, so I'm going to kind of try to quickly just show you then what we did with these results. You can then take this, you would save it, and then you can export it into Excel. When we export it into Excel, can you see, hopefully you can see my PowerPoint again here.
Yes, we can see it.
Should be able to. Okay, great. So this is what you just saw. And then when we exported it into Excel, this is sort of what it looked like. We had these, and then we made these additional columns. For us, we needed to do that because we did not code every single response. So we wanted to provide accurate percentages that were based on what was actually coded, the number of respondents within a financial category. It was coded, so that's what our percentages are. So 30% of those that live comfortably spoke about people. This is that red at the top is what you saw on that first bar. 30% through 38% of those that don't meet their basic expenses. So hopefully that showed you how we could get there. And then from there, what you can do in NVivo is actually click on these cells, and when you click on them, it will bring up the references. So you can read through all of the text and get a better sense of what they're saying there. So we went back and did that in NVivo as well. and from there started to create a joint display. So a joint display is a way to sort of present the data in a form that's a table or a figure that will simultaneously array the quantitative and the qualitative results. It also provides a really great way to sort of iteratively analyze the data and draw out new insights. This is called a statistics by theme array, where you can see the statistics are there by the quantitative categories, by theme along the rows, and we would pull out sort of notes and example quotes there on the last column as we were reading through the passages. And then we kind of didn't love that one, so we did a second version here where you can see we brought over a bar chart for some of that quantitative data, so we could more easily see what that data was showing us, and we could also put in sort of short description and add additional example quotes. We still weren't satisfied, and that brought us to sort of this final version where we were able to make what's really important is this meta-analysis that you can see here. What did we learn from looking at the data in this way? And in this way of presenting it, you can kind of see we transposed the columns and the rows so that we had this meta-analysis at the top, and could see that make a general statement. About a third or more of all respondents mentioned people as a source of hope. Young adults who are financially secure discussed people most frequently and often spoke about their children. And if you can remember, that's how I explained that bar graph that we had shown in the beginning. And then even further, if you wanted to fully really integrate and go back to the quantitative data that we had showed you, where we looked at financial situation by mental health and social support to tell this full story, we had those that were most financially secure reporting lower levels of social support. Yet they were most likely to mention people as providing a sense of hope for the future. So we were intrigued by that finding. And then that now started to make sense as we read through the responses, because we saw they were mostly speaking about their children as a source of hope, which are not necessarily providing a source of social support. And that may be why they're also reporting these increased rates of depression. So that's sort of how we tied it all together in one example. And again, this is just back to show you this. Just to, review the sort of advantages and disadvantages of using surveys in this way is that it can take less time than traditionally it takes to collect qualitative and mixed methods data, which can be quite time consuming, especially with sequential designs. You can get a larger sample size often with surveys, and you can quite easily link the qualitative and quantitative data as was demonstrated. And then the disadvantages are really that there's no opportunity for follow-up questions that you often have in qualitative data collection. So sometimes that depth of response is quite limited in what they say, and you would like to kind of ask some additional questions to really understand what they're saying. And unfortunately, in this method, you're not able to quite do that. And then in any survey, you can lose people along the way. So what we ended up doing after we actually changed our survey, after it was in the field for just a little bit of time, and moved our open-ended questions sporadically throughout the survey so that they weren't all grouped together, but that they also were coming sort of in the middle section. So they weren't too close to the beginning where people sort of saw an open-ended question and decided not to keep going, and they weren't too far at the end where people had sort of maybe gotten tired or fatigued and not completed it. So then just as a review, the top tips are designing a survey with those qualitative questions throughout, really considering your mixed methods design and the type of analytic integration that will best fit with your intent, what you're trying to do. We wanted to kind of do some comparisons and see differences of this core phenomenon of what provides hope for these young adults based on financial situation, and that's what led us to this path. And then using, QDA, qualitative data analysis software like NVivo, is highly recommended if possible, and you can just make sure that your quantitative data is coded before importing, and take time to think about how you want to create your coding structure, and organize those open-ended questions, thinking about how you might use it in this mixed methods way. And then using the joint displays and graphs iteratively during the analysis and reporting phases. And that's all that I have today. This is my contact info, and I ran a little longer than I thought, but I think we still have some time for questions, hopefully. And feel free to email me at this email if we don't get to a question you had.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Erin, for that. And we do have a number of questions here, but before we do that, I just want to show my screen and just to go over a few things about NVivo that you might not be aware of. Basically, what we've been doing at QSR is to try to support the whole research journey that you have, from collecting your data all the way through to writing it up in analysis. And so basically, I don't know if the latest version of NVivo actually integrates with Word, Excel, and Outlook, so that you can actually, from Word, you can export your transcript, or from Excel, you can export your survey, and it will be picked up by NVivo. So there's a direct integration now. That's with the latest version of NVivo that came out last year in March. We also have NVivo transcription, which uses AI, speech recognition AI, that will basically give you a great first draft of your audio or video file in half the time of the length of the file. It's pretty amazing. If you haven't tried it, try it. I think you get 15 minutes free, and either that can be pay as you go, or you can subscribe to it for a year. Obviously, there's NVivo itself, and we have both the Windows and Mac version. And then if you collaborate in a team, we have two ways of doing that. One is a specific collaboration server, which is on your organization's server, so that allows you to work with teammates who have access to that server. So that's real time. So the project's up in the server and people can work simultaneously on it. Or we have Collaboration Cloud, which is different in that basically each team member will have a copy of the master copy, work with it, and then upload it in the cloud, where the sort of the PI can then download them and merge them, and then upload the latest version up in the cloud for that. And also we have a whole academy, NVivo Academy, where you can have online courses, as well as one-to-one coaching, on-site workshops when we can both get back to being face-to-face. And we also have a certification program for people to be certified. So that's more advanced, and you actually get examined on that. Right, so if I go to the next one, as I said, my colleague Stacy Penna, we're hoping that she was able to join us at the end, but she's actually the NVivo Community Director, and really you should join the NVivo community, because there's lots going on. I mean, this webinar series is one of the series that the community provides. Also, Stacy has done many podcasts with researchers, both qualitative and mixed methods. They're mostly around 25 half an hour. I mean, really worth listening to. Some of them used NVivo, some of them aren't. You get to learn about, some interesting ways of collecting and analyzing data through the podcasts. And also, I want to encourage all of you to come to the NVivo virtual conference, which is September 24-hour conference, September 22nd, 23rd. And the call for abstracts are now open. So please put in an abstract if you've done some research using NVivo that you want to share with us. It was very successful last year when we ran the virtual conference. We had like about 800 participants there. Also, we have Stacy runs research networks, and also we have a community forum. So now Stacy's sort of organizing groups according to different interests that people might have. So there's a mixed methods group, there might be, I don't know, thematic analysis group, that sort of thing. And also I will be announcing shortly that we'll be running our second research grant for early career researchers. So I'll be announcing that in September. And just to say that the application deadline will be the end of November. And that's a $25,000 US dollar award over 2 years for a piece of research where you've been using NVivo. And here are some of our next, you can see here our next webinar. And yeah, so I've just talked about the conference here. So yeah, the call for abstracts, it ends June 30th. And yeah, the theme is transcending boundaries in qualitative research, and we're sort of interpreting that in a very wide way. And what I am particularly interested in at the moment, we haven't opened the call for the grants, but I am looking for experienced researchers who are willing to be reviewers of the early career research grant. So please get in touch with me, Silvana Di Gregorio. There's my email. If you're willing to review grants, and you just have to fill out a short questionnaire, so I'll be able to match people who are reviewing with the applicants. So obviously, it's not for the reviewers have to not be early career researchers, which we're, from 2013 to 2020 is what we're looking at. But yes, I would like to have more reviewers for any of you out there who are willing to do that. So I'll just move into the questions that we had here. And we have a few questions. And yeah, one person wanted to know whether you use the same people for both the qualitative and the quantitative parts. Well, because you did a survey, the answer for that would be yes, right?
Yeah.
And another one wanted to have the what was the site, the research on 1 + 1 = 3, and someone has replied that it's 1 + 1 = 3 integration challenge. Is that in Fetters and Freshwater 2015? Is that the correct reference? Great.
Yeah.
And right, so let's see. Right, so someone's asked here, what were the financial questions asked before or after the open-ended questions? And have you tested the order of your open and close-ended questions to understand how the themes change?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back to our survey, which I of course left on the other side of the room here, and I'm attached to my phone at the moment. But so I can't get it out. But if I'm remembering correctly, the financial questions were asked more towards the end, where we were asking the demographic questions, and then we did not do tests, so they would have come after the open-ended questions. We did not test the order of the questions in terms of that particular question, the financial situation question, coming before or after the open-ended questions. We did move around the open-ended questions, like I said, a little bit after having the survey in the field because they were kind of almost too close to the beginning where people were not continuing with the survey. So I could look back to maybe look at some other testing of questions, but it's a good idea. We did not do that, but I think it's a good idea for the future.
Right. Thank you. Right. So just a couple of questions here. Right. Right. So there is one question here. So would presenting percentages or using matrix crosstab coding queries be considered a quantitative procedure or still in the qualitative realm? Wouldn't the possibility of moving into external generalizability, generalization to a population, is what would ultimately qualify a method as quantitative within a mixed methods project? Right, and I wonder if using numbers in qualitative research in fact turns it into a mixed methods analysis. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So I don't think I would feel comfortable generalizing this data because it is based in the qualitative data. You know, the responses are still based on the qualitative data. And we did use some of those. We did quantify a bit some of the kind of patterns across the subgroups. And, you know, I know that there's definitely could be a good discussion around that if we had a little bit more time, because I think that there are pros and cons to that for sure. I think in this way, to make sure that we're still also looking within the text of the qualitative data, so we're not solely relying on the quantitative aspects of it, is important and a piece of what you know, is part of the mixed methods design as well. So I don't know if that's totally getting at the question, but hopefully providing a little bit of information.
Right. Yeah. And they right. So yeah, there was a question about how you created the graphs, whether you created them in NVivo 12 or not.
No, yeah, those were just created in Excel.
Right.
We did do the word cloud in NVivo, but that was the only graphical thing we used.
Right. Yeah, someone asked how the automatic pattern coding works. I mean, I can answer that quickly. I mean, it is machine learning. I mean, basically you would code, we recommend at least 10% by hand. And then then based on your coding for a code, it will code the rest that haven't been coded of the text. And yeah, you have a lot of control, because what it's doing is that it's finding what words were used the most in the coded passages, but then you can before you run it, you can then select the ones that you know are most likely to be relevant for that code. And so it is a quick way, if you have a lot of data, um, to code it. And obviously, we always recommend that you check that. Yeah, so if you had that version, which is now standard in the latest version of NVivo, They could have saved some time. You said you did 30%.
Yeah, we did 30%, although we're very excited to try to do the automatic coding from there. I think that is ideal. I mean, we feel like we reached saturation, but I think it's great to confirm it with that.
Right. And someone was worried about aggregation for the parent codes.
Mm.
Um, just to say how you, I mean, it's quite simple in NVivo. You just click to aggregate. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, you saw that as a positive thing. I'm not sure why this person is worried about it because she doesn't quite explain. Um, but you can quickly unaggregate it.
Hmm.
So you can, chop and just leave the parent node empty. But you can aggregate it when you want it. So I don't know if you went backwards and forwards that way or you just
Hmm.
aggregated. Yeah.
No, we did. Yeah, we did a little bit. I mean, we really were just using that aggregate to make sure that for some of those patterns, we weren't, because of any duplicate codes within, one of those parent nodes, that we weren't, putting too much weight, more weight than it should have on it,
Right.
if that makes
Okay.
sense.
So yeah, yeah. Um, okay. So I mean, I think we've gone over a bit over time. So I want to thank you, Erin, very much for your presentation. Um, as I said, you can download the handouts from the GoToWebinar little window here. But the presentation itself has been recorded, and you'll be getting an email with a link to the recording. Um, so thank you again, Erin, and
Great.
thank you everyone else who's been listening in. Um, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.